Are you still spinning the rock some? You still throwing some, or kind of just
Oh,
taking?
dude, yeah, I still like to go out there and spin it.
Yeah.
I did. I'm training some quarterbacks
Oh, cool.
under qbmotion. So it started qbmotion Midwest,
Yeah.
and so I get out there and I'll spin it, make sure that
Yeah.
those kids know that I still got it, and
Yeah. Yeah. That's
you
dope.
know,
What's that process like? Like, do y'all have like an evaluation when they come in, or like you kind of know what they're working on, or I guess it depends
yeah,
on the
yeah.
level. Yeah.
Depends on the level and the kid, right? So if
Yeah.
they're a college athlete or high school or youth, right? Kind of love to get some clips before them and kind of see, what their inefficiencies are, and then how we can address it in the first session and build on it from there. But it's interesting because every quarterback's a little different,
Yeah.
and what their inefficiency may be,
Right.
and then just getting them to feel how to fix that. I think is pretty fun, and to
Yeah.
understand the different way to do it is unique. It's a challenge, and it's also an interesting thing. Whether that's in a virtual session or in person, is just finding
Yeah.
the ways to explain it to every kid on how that clicks into their brain.
Did you have a quarterback trainer growing up, or?
Yeah,
Yeah.
so when I was growing up, I worked with a dude named Mike Parker,
Okay.
who's from Northern Kentucky, and he works at Pro Football Focus now,
Oh,
or
cool.
has for quite some time. And it was just base fundamental stuff, and I really enjoyed working with him. And then I worked with some other guys as well. When I was in high school, I worked with a dude named Jimmy Weddle.
Okay.
And then when I got to college, my motion just, man, it started to get really whack. I'm not gonna
Yeah.
lie.
Yeah.
I had a great offense coordinator and a great coach, but he didn't really spend a lot of time on fundamentals. So
Yeah.
I had a position coach recommend Trenton Kirkland to me,
Okay.
who's the offense coordinator at Lipscomb Academy in Nashville, and he was connected with Rob Williams at qbmotion, and then ever since then I was working with TK with Trenton when he was in Nashville still, because he was an analyst at Vandy for the past couple of years.
Yeah.
And then I was working virtually through FaceTime with Rob for almost every week
Mm.
the last 4 years of my college career.
Awesome. What was that?
Yeah.
I know I want to get into like the meat and potatoes of everything, but what was that
Yeah.
like working like remotely, I guess, if you just kind of put the phone up and he's able to
Yeah,
watch you throw and
it's so simple. It,
yeah.
it sounds really weird, right? You're like, okay, how can I get coached virtually through FaceTime? When in reality, like he's in my ear the whole time through it. I
Yeah.
literally would throw an AirPod in,
Yeah.
put my phone on the tripod, and I'd say, "Do you want it chest side, like facing my chest, or behind
Hmm.
me, behind my shoulder?" And it would change and vary based on what drill we were doing, but I found it very effective because it was, and truthfully too, being a college quarterback, like I didn't, on a Saturday morning, I didn't want to drive 30 minutes
Right.
to, whatever, or drive 2 hours, wherever somebody may have been.
Hmm.
And I had, the best person who could work on my, biomechanics. And all I had to do was FaceTime him. To me, it
Yeah.
was like, okay,
Yeah.
this is sweet. Like,
Yeah.
this is amazing. So it worked really well for me, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, that's super dope. We'll give him a shout out when we're done with the interview to all our millions of followers that are going to be
I
watching.
love it. I
Uh,
love it.
I'll go ahead and just kind of intro us, Tanner. So yeah, this is episode 1 of season 2 of the QB Spotlight podcast. Just a big
Nice.
quarterback hub, right? Where
I love it.
we just bring in quarterbacks and coaches and skill trainers that kind of just talk everything quarterback related. And so super pumped to have you on, Tanner, and one of the best quarterbacks in all of University of Minnesota history. All these records I don't want to butcher, but most wins in Minnesota history, number 2 in touchdown passes, passing yards, a bunch of other good stuff, dude, that I do want to get into, but before we dive into that, I know this past year it's like a whirlwind for you, right? From a few teams
Yeah.
in the NFL to coaching back at University of Minnesota. So what was that schedule like? Like maybe take people through like what this past year looked like before we kind of dive into more of it, and just kind of like let us know what it was like and like that schedule, because you are different states back and forth doing several different
Yeah.
things.
Yeah, definitely. So for me, we played in our bowl game. We played in the Bad Boy Mowers Pinstripe Bowl in New York, at Yankee Stadium. After the game, I drove back. I drove to Richmond, Virginia. It's where my wife's family is. We spent 3 days there, and then from there, came back to Minneapolis. And after that, it was kind of the madness started.
Yeah.
So I trained for a week and a half and flew out to Orlando, played in the Hula Bowl. After the Hula Bowl, got invited to the East West Shrine Bowl. So was training for another 2 weeks. But after Orlando, I went straight to Boca, Florida, which is where I trained with Game Face Training.
Cool.
So I was in Boca for, I want to say, only 2 weeks before I went to Vegas for the Shrine Bowl. The Shrine Bowl was in Vegas last year. It's in Dallas this year. I went to the Shrine Bowl, which is a week-long event, and it's really you're grinding and practicing every day, and then you play a game.
Yeah.
And you're doing interviews, whether it's 4 or 5 hours of interviews. It's a mentally long process, and you got to stay sharp for it. And then after the Shrine Bowl, I was in Boca for a little while, and then would go back to Minneapolis for a week, and then went back to Boca to train and just train for my pro day the best I could, and really enjoyed my time with Game Face Training and those guys, and great people there. And so after pro day, me and my wife went on our delayed honeymoon.
Nice.
So spent a week in Mexico. Then after that was really just kind of playing the waiting game, doing interviews. Took a visit to the Packers, to the Bengals, had a ton of Zoom interviews with quarterback coaches and with scouting personnel, really just putting your best foot forward. And then after that, draft went on, ended up getting a call late in the draft that the Steelers wanted to sign me, and some other teams picked the Steelers. A week later, I was in Pittsburgh. Was in Pittsburgh for a month and a half. I left Pittsburgh after OTAs, which was a great process. I mean, there's great people there. Loved OTAs, loved the process of it. Essentially Monday through Friday, you're working, and then people would leave on the weekends. And so I was in Pittsburgh for the whole time of rookie minicamp OTAs. Flew back to Minnesota a week later. Our daughter was born. So month of July into June was, became a dad and was training for training camp at the same time. Went to training camp with the Steelers, got ready, was there for the whole month of the end of July, whole month of August, got cut. Was in Richmond, Virginia for 2 weeks after that, just relaxing and training and staying ready. Came back to Minnesota, started coaching as an offensive analyst at the University of Minnesota, which I thoroughly enjoyed. There was amazing people there. While I was coaching, got called to be on the Vikings practice squad. Said, yeah, sweet.
Yeah.
So I was on the practice squad, got cut from the practice squad because I knew it was a temporary thing. They needed somebody to run the scout team, and I was there, and I guess I did well in my pro day, and they enjoyed me and heard good things. So did that, went back to coaching, and then they called me again to bring me back in for a week, a little bit longer of a week. Did that. The second time they brought me in, I was scout team, and then we were playing Purdue that Saturday.
Yeah.
I was a scout team quarterback for walkthroughs and doing that stuff. Practiced on Friday. After Friday practice, legitimately, they were like, hey, we're going to let you go again, but, do you want to go to the game? Like, we would love to have you around. And I was like, well, if you're going to cut me, like, I have work to do.
Yeah.
Caught a flight that night to Indianapolis, Ubered to West Lafayette, and was in time for the game on Saturday.
Wow, so you were practicing with the NFL team on Friday, and then you had coaching duties for the University of Minnesota on Saturday, flying to that. Wow,
correct.
That's a story. Yeah.
It was sweet though. Coach O'Connell was like, "Look, man, like, I want you to come to our game too. Like, I love having you around, but I don't want you to miss anything. Like, when does the team plan already? Has it already left?" And I was like, "Yeah." I was like, "But if I could get there today, like, I'll make it." And he was like, "Okay, like, we'll get you a flight then. Like, no problem." And so I was on the flight and in West Lafayette that evening. It was wild.
That's dope. Wow. So in a course of let's call it 9-10 months or whatever, you get done playing your last college game. You have several Senior Bowl type games to play after, some All-Star type games, training for the combine, get picked up by a team. You'll have your first kid, a daughter. What's your daughter's name, by the way?
It's Isla.
Love that. Pretty name. Yeah. So you got your first daughters, and then the next few months you are on 2 NFL teams and you are also coaching for the University of Minnesota. So definitely a whirlwind. And I think this week is actually the Shrine Bowl, if I remember correctly. So it's funny you kind of mentioned and touched on that a little bit. I've been seeing some of the take us before we keep going on that Shrine Bowl, just because it's going on right now. What is like? I know you mentioned it a little bit, but are you basically you're practicing? You have a ton of scouts there. You're meeting with teams, like you're watching film. What's that whole week like?
Yeah, so you're working with NFL coaches, so that in itself is an interview. Essentially, you're going through installs, so and they shrink it down. It's like 2 installs, and it's even those are really kind of depending on how it would be, probably rookie minicamp day 1.
Okay.
For whatever staff that may be. And so they shrink it down. They want you to play fast, but they install it to you. You got to be able to do it, right? That's the first time for quarterbacks that you have the earpiece in your helmet, and you got to hear it and reciprocate it in the huddle. So you're learning that, which I thought that was awesome. The first time doing it was fun. But you're essentially practicing, getting installs after practice. You have more install meetings, watch film, and then you have interviews. And so it's just that process, and always have to stay sharp and stay ready. But it was an awesome experience, and I loved learning from the coaches that I did in Atlanta, and it was sweet.
Yeah, man, super dope. So I know it's been a whirlwind this past year, and right now it's just like a transition phase of life, coaching some quarterbacks right now. The season's over, at least we don't want the Super Bowls left, but the season's over. So before we move on to some of because I want to dive into your time at Minnesota. We got a lot of college football fans that keep up with what we do, but maybe just give everyone like a brief football background, like from high school to now. Obviously, you just talked about this last year, but maybe like your recruiting process and how you went to Minnesota and kind of what that whole deal was like.
Yeah, certainly. So brief synopsis, I went to 2 high schools. The first high school I went to was in Eastern Kentucky, small single-A school of 400 kids, great football, great athletes too. It was called Hazard High School. Started there my first 2 years of high school. We lost 2 or 3 games. After that, I transferred to Northern Kentucky, which is where I'm from, a school called Ryle High School. Going into my junior year was when I got my first offer from Wake Forest. And then I got offered from Louisville, and then some MAC schools followed up after that. After my junior year, we had a great year. Lost 2 games. We were very successful. Flipped it around from where it was at the year before. I stopped growing, so I didn't get to 6'2". I stayed at 6'1.5". And so some of those schools kind of, I got offered by Louisville and Wake, kind of began to fall off really. Later on in the process, Wake Forest came back on, but wasn't the right fit for me. Ended up committing to Western Michigan University, which is where Coach Fleck and Kirk Soraka, his whole staff was at. Going to my senior year, we do great. We lose 1 game in the playoffs, undefeated in the regular season. We lose 44-42 in my last high school game. And so I ended up, the day I'm supposed to leave to go to Kalamazoo and enroll at Western Michigan, the day before, Coach Fleck takes the Minnesota job. I wake up, going to get one last workout in with my trainer. Get a text at, I think it was 7 a.m. or something. It was like, hey, Tanner, call me. Called him, said, hey, I'm taking the Minnesota job. And I'm still tired.
Yeah.
In bed. Lights aren't on. I said, okay, sweet. Yeah, I'm coming. Awesome. So ended up going to Minnesota, and I guess that's kind of where my story began at Minnesota.
So the day before you were supposed to go on campus at Western Michigan is when Fleck took the Minnesota job, and that's
correct.
And so you pretty much just committed that day. And did you go up the next day to Minnesota, or do you have some time?
No, so I had a week. So I had 1 more week, and then I was like, okay, never been to Minnesota. Have know nothing about the state of Minnesota. I know it's cold, but Michigan's cold too. Like whatever, cool. And it was the best thing that ever happened to me.
What was so was it a no-brainer when you found out? Like you didn't visit the school or anything like that. You just knew that's reflected and everyone was going. You're like,
well, yeah, it was like okay, like these are the people that I wanted to be around, that I wanted to mold me into being a good football player and a good man, and I get to do it in the Big Ten. Sweet, awesome. Let's go.
What was some other reasons that made you want to follow Fleck? That's actually one of our questions we have from a Minnesota fan. Like, But yeah, what made you just be like, hey, no doubt, I'll follow you like within minutes of
Yeah.
him telling you?
Yeah, I think in high school, like I just fell in love with that. I was going to be challenged to be a better man and the best player that I could be in every area of my life, and not just about football. And I think that was appealing to me. And then, I was definitely attracted to the fact of, you know, building something bigger than yourself,
Yeah,
right? Building a strong culture and having a strong team, people that buy in together and fight for one, common
yeah,
cause. Those are all very appetizing to me. But I'd say the big thing is like I wanted to, be challenged in every aspect of my life and not just
yeah.
one. And I certainly was.
Yeah, awesome, Tan. It's interesting. You mentioned, you wanted to create a good culture and build something. It's something y'all definitely did at Minnesota, being the all-time winningest quarterback in Minnesota history. Being the quarterback, we all won 11 wins, arguably the best team in Minnesota history, having been the top 10 at some points. Like even the seasons that maybe weren't as good as that 2019 season, y'all still had like several
Yeah.
9-win seasons. Like that whole like 3, 4, 5, whatever year span, you can argue is the best span of football in Minnesota history. So it's
Hmm.
interesting that you went to that school with the mindset you want to build something and have a good culture and a legacy. It kind of sounds like, even though you didn't necessarily say those words, that's exactly
Right.
kind of what you did. So I know you have. I mean, just you could probably talk for hours about memories at Minnesota, but you have a few 1, 2, 3 memories that really stand out. It can be game memories. It can be just like memories in the locker room with your boys or whatever. Do you have like a few memories that you'll just cherish that really stand out from your time at Minnesota?
Yeah, certainly. I think one of them is just time spent with each other.
Yeah.
Whether that be bonding moments with O line, going to a cabin, or whatever that may be. Just spending time together is definitely the number one thing. Outside of that, games. I have two. I really have three that come to my mind
Okay.
immediately. Two of them, people would probably, if or Minnesota fans would probably understand. When we beat Penn State, um, that was awesome.
Yeah.
That was just a fantastic day. After that, you can see my daughter in the background. She's happy. I think she liked that day too.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and then when we beat Purdue, I went 21-22 for
Wow.
395, and it was just like people talk about being in a flow state,
Yep.
and that was a flow state game for me.
Mm.
And then in 2020, we beat Purdue again. Um, we were 1-2 at the time, kind of at a crossroads in our season of
Yeah.
how this is going to go. We ended up going 3-4, not great, but it could have been way worse.
Right.
We came together and found a way to get a win, and that was something that was huge for me. But I think a lot of it is just like the little things that people don't even know, whether it's
Yeah.
like the morning workouts and the day that you finish the last winter workout and you're like, okay, sweet. When you finish spring ball and you're hanging out, like stuff like that is the stuff that I always cherish too.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned the winter workouts. It's like I played college ball, not very successfully 10 years ago. My only touchdown was to the other team. If that tells you how good I was. And I was changed positions shortly after. But it was always like some of your favorite and worst, or like least favorite days. Your favorite day was like the last workout before a break, whether it was like winter break or
Right.
those 3 weeks you get in the summer. And one of your
Yeah.
least favorite days was your first day back to workouts, and you have your conditioning tests, and everyone's
Yeah.
kind of scared. You have like trash cans set up like at different stations. It's not going to be good. But going back to Penn State, when y'all beat Penn State, was that 2019,
Hmm.
the year y'all won?
Yeah. Yeah, it was.
Do you have just to give insight to some people, like, you have like right now, like the spreads and the point totals are so big in football, right? You have like, hey, Penn State's favored by a touchdown or 6.5 or whatever it may be. Is
Right.
that something like you as a player would know just because it's like plastered everywhere on social media?
Yeah, sometimes definitely. Especially too, like, hey, like Vegas thinks we're not gonna win, like
Yeah.
whatever. Like they don't know what they don't know what they don't know.
Right.
Different ways to find motivation.
Right.
But I think it's hard in today's world to not know who's supposed
Yeah.
to win. Or if you
Yeah.
open up your ESPN app and you're, say
True.
you're playing in the Big Ten and you're going to watch, anything pops up and
Yeah.
you play at Minnesota and it's a favorite on your ESPN app. Well, it's going to see the thing of the percentage,
Right.
75% chance for Minnesota winning the game or 10%
Yeah.
chance for Minnesota to win. You're like, it's hard to ignore and hard to see
Yeah.
it. But so I think in today's world, it's harder for
Yeah.
players to to handle that. And, it really, however they can take that information in and use that as fuel, good or bad, right?
Sure.
To have a positive impact on their play and the future success of the team.
Is that something that like you talk about as a player, like, oh, so and so, or they think we're going to lose by 10 points or whatever? Is that something like you talk about, or you just kind of like laugh about it, you see it, and just keep working?
Yeah, I think both, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes you're like, all right, bro, like these guys have no idea what they're talking about.
Right. Right.
And other times it's like, okay, like count us out again, count us out
Yeah.
again.
Yeah.
So I think great leaders have a way of using that information for fuel for the team. And I
Yeah.
will say there was times where I had no idea if we were supposed to win or not. So it's a wide range, but it is
Yeah.
hard to ignore that stuff.
Yeah. No, that's super interesting, especially in today's day and age of football, and I mean football in general,
Hmm.
college, NFL.
Yeah.
And talking about some of your favorite memories, do you have like a specific one or two plays that you just like vividly remember that just like, I'm sure you have a ton that stick out to you. Every
Hmm.
quarterback has like all these plays, but do you have one or two that you can recall? It's like your favorite play, what the play was, what the read was, what are you reading, maybe some X's and O's without giving away too much of any offensive scheme or any game plan that you can kind of take us through a little bit.
Yeah, certainly. The first one that comes to mind, and it's because I was thinking about it recently, and we just talked about it with Penn State, is they ran a 2Z tilt blitz where they brought two off the edge to the field.
Okay.
So the free safety played the field half, boundary corner played the half. And so the free safety was on the boundary hash, was responsible for the field half. So we had to run all the way over and cover all that grass. We found a way to recognize when it was coming, and we had a check for it.
Mm.
So the offense coordinator made that check. It was the first drive of the game. We changed it. The back ended up barely sealing it off. The aiming point for the throw was at 13 yards, two yards away from the sideline. I probably threw it at like 16, and it was about a yard away from being a boomerang, pick six. But luckily for us, it went the other way, and Rashad Bateman housed it.
Nice.
And that kind of got us going into that game, and got our offense moving and going in the right direction. So that's one I definitely remember
Yeah.
specifically because it was such a complex scheme at the time,
Mm.
right? They're bringing two off the edge. Um, they're making the free safeties got to play the field half, but it looked the exact same. There was one small
Mm.
difference in the way they aligned, and the offensive coordinator Kirk Straka was able to find it and then
Mm.
take advantage of it.
Is that something you picked up like watching film or like
Yeah,
on the actual? Okay.
yeah, he just something he picked up and
Yeah.
found a way to check it and make a play.
Yeah.
But it was yeah, it's just a credit to those coaches
Yeah.
and him spending the time to find a way to take advantage of something.
Very cool. Is how many hours of film per week you think you would average of watching during the season?
Uh, Quite a lot, to be
Yeah.
honest with you.
Yeah.
I never really. I always liked a quote from Peyton Manning. People always asked him, and this always stuck to me when I was a young player. People asked Peyton Manning, how much film do you watch? And he said, I don't know. I don't keep track. I just watch enough until I'm ready.
Yeah.
And
Very.
I always carried that mindset. Like, I'm not just
Yeah.
going to sit in here for an hour and, it's very easy to watch film like you're watching a movie.
Yeah.
But if you're locked in and attentive, you don't have to
Yeah.
spend 4 hours.
Yeah.
2 hours can be more beneficial than four.
Right.
But I was just, I don't know, I wasn't going to leave a stone unturned and
Yeah.
kind of looked at it as when I was prepared, I could be confident, and it allowed me to have the chance to play and kind of was my edge.
Yeah, no, well, it definitely paid off, Tanner, and obviously with any college career, it's you play as long as you do. You have so many highs and lows, and all those highs and lows like help create who you are today. You have a few, and it can be one or two, maybe some trials that stand out that like really kind of help develop who you are today, or maybe like at the time it
Yeah.
sucked, but looking back, you're like, man, I'm kind of glad I went through that. Like, is there
Yeah.
one or two that kind of stick out that kind of
Yeah, certainly. I could give you two. The first one was in 2018, my redshirt freshman year. I felt like nobody wins a job in spring ball, but I felt like going into training camp, this was my job to lose. I was competing with Zach Ennickstead. In training camp, I really just played timidly, played not to make a mistake and had a terrible camp.
Yeah.
And he beat me out and I lost the job. And it was a great learning experience for me, right? Like I could have there was a time like you know, had a poor attitude at times.
Yeah.
I didn't, anticipate myself being the backup. I always saw myself being the starter that year, and I carried myself that way, prepared that way. Why is this happening?
Yeah.
But it was um, a great opportunity for me to remind myself that my foundation wasn't in
Yeah.
football; it was in
Yeah.
Christ.
Yep.
And I needed that reminder. Like I needed that, and it also showed me that it doesn't matter. Like you have to prepare and be ready. Because when you get an opportunity, make it count.
Yep.
And so 6 weeks went on in the season. We weren't having a great year. Zach got hurt, and then I came in and threw for like 220 in the second half. We still lost. We got smoked by Nebraska. And then the next week I got to start because he was out, and I didn't look at it as all right. This is my only chance. I was like, okay, God's given me an opportunity to play. I'm going to make the
Mm-hmm.
most of it. And we won. We had lost 4 in a row in Big Ten play. It's our first Big Ten win of the year. I threw for like 300 and 3 touchdowns. And then I started, a lot of games in a row until I got hurt in my senior year.
Yep.
But it was just a great lesson for me to, one, like I control my attitude.
Yep.
2, this doesn't define who I am, and I'm going to be ready when I get a chance. And I say the second one, just real quickly, was 2021. We talking about favorites. We were 30.5-point favorites to Bowling Green State University. They came in and beat us. I went 5 for 9, threw for 56 yards, turned the ball over 3 times, I believe. I played terrible. Couldn't have played worse. And it was an opportunity for me to, one, you never outlook your opponent. I didn't think I did, but it was just a great reminder of that. 2, I wasn't emotionally ready to play the game. I hadn't dealt with some things. I was grieving. My father had passed away that July, and kind of just didn't really open myself up to it. And I
Yeah.
remember how low I felt after that game. All I wanted to do was talk to my father. He wasn't there, and I just felt like, how honestly, I was like, how am I going to
Yeah.
get past this? And at the time, I was like, that might have been the last game I ever played.
Yeah.
Like there's such low thoughts. And quickly I had to pick myself up and keep fighting. And we ended up winning 9 games that year. And, it was a successful season. But in that moment, like
Yeah.
it could have went really poorly. And so just times like that, you got to remind yourself and pick yourself up. But it was a great reminder to me
Yeah.
that I have to, take care of, myself and make sure that I'm not just, putting stuff away
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
really dealing with things. But I mean, it was a reminder for our whole team. Like
Yeah.
we should have won the game, period. But we didn't. And we didn't score enough points on offense. And we didn't execute just the base things, and we weren't at our best. And it's
Yeah.
a great reminder that if you're not at your best in college football, anybody can beat you.
Yep.
And so it was just a another reminder of, look, like you have to be at your best every day. That's what's required and that's what's demanded. And I think that's an important life lesson too. Like it's easy to just walk through life, whatever it may be, show up to work, do your job, clock
Mm-hmm.
out. But you have to be at your best every day. You have to demand
Yeah.
that out of yourself.
Yeah. That's a good word, Tanner. And thanks for sharing that, opening it up. I know
Mhm.
it's always fun to like talk about like the super highs and all the great stuff, but the trials in life tend to actually be more important for us, unfortunately.
Yeah.
'Cause it sucks to go through, but I'm probably like 10 years older than you, and they keep coming, but you keep learning and growing
Right.
from them. And we do have a few questions from some Minnesota fans that wanted to ask you. So I'm just going to kind of, you don't have to spend too much time on it. Maybe there's like 4 or 5. I'll just throw it your way and you kind of answer back however you see fit. So first one was, what was it like throwing to Tyler Johnson and Rashad Bateman in 2019?
Amazing. They were great players and made a lot of plays, and obviously are both very successful still in the NFL. Rashad just was 1 game away from being in a Super Bowl, and
Yeah.
Tyler's won a Super Bowl and has been on a lot of different teams and found success. 2 different players, 2 success stories, and it was a lot easier to play quarterback when you got guys like that outside.
Yeah, 2 awesome receivers. What is a misconception about Minnesota football or Coach Fleck or something that maybe the outside looking in thinks one thing, but it's different? It's just a big misconception.
Oh man, that's a great question. I think many ways, there's many things, right? Like I think if you just look at how Minnesota football has changed over the past 7 years. It's not the same as it was before, and
Mm.
working hard. The staff there is continuing to work hard to put their best foot forward every year. And there's a lot of talented guys on the roster, and it's there's a phrase in Minnesota just like, oh, it's just Minnesota sports and bad things happen, but it doesn't have to be true. And I think the Gophers are in a great spot, and they're going to continue to improve and continue to get better every year.
Yeah. Last question, because we answered some of these questions as we were talking. Which coordinator really not that you enjoyed most per se, but what coordinator had like the biggest impact on you, or do you have any like good stories from a coordinator that you learned something from that maybe you still remember to this day?
Yeah, I was fortunate. I only had two. Mike Sanford Jr. Was here 2 years, and then unfortunately got fired, but was a great man and taught me a lot of important life lessons and connected with him well. But Kirk Soraka, I think for me, he was my first coordinator in college and my last. He recruited me in high school, and just his approach to the game. He's the current offense coordinator at Rutgers now, and he really taught me how to understand defenses, how to understand defensive football, how to understand why we're doing what we're doing. And he's somebody who pushed you every day with an urgency to be at your best. And again, I was fortunate to have two, but they both were great at different things. And there's a lot of stories I could tell, but we could be on this podcast for hours. So
no, that's a great answer. Very fortunate to have those two guys. What's your overall take on the quarterback room right now in Minnesota? I know they brought in Max Brossmer from New Hampshire. What and I know you were around the team last year when you weren't playing. So what's the quarterback room like right now? Like what's some stuff you can tell Minnesota fans to expect for next year? And
I think I think they're in a great spot. With the two guys that just came in, right? You got Max and Drake. Drake was the Arkansas Gatorade State Player of the Year, threw a bazillion touchdowns and like 5 interceptions the entire year. I think you could look it up. I think he threw like 50 touchdowns and maybe 5 picks. Something just bizarre. They won the state title. Just kind of a no nonsense approach. A guy who can really understand how to throw people open, and that's a early enrollee freshman who's incredibly talented and has a bright future. And then you bring in Max Brossmer from New Hampshire, who had a very successful career there. Was up for the Walter Payton Award, so semifinalist for that. And just I had very limited experience, but just seems like an absolute football guy. A nerd football junkie who really can connect with teammates well. And so I think the room's in a great spot. They got great coaches in there. With Greg Harbaugh Jr., with the offense coordinator, who is a phenomenal coach, and then you got Keegan O'Hara. An analyst that's there helping out a little bit, and he's a going to be a riser in the coaching profession, a guy who's really going to take off and have a ton of success. But I think they're in a great spot. They got great coaches and great quarterbacks, and I'm excited about what's going to be displayed on the field this fall.
Yeah, super dope, and you got a new quarterback room, and you also got a new Big Ten, right? Like 10, 15 years ago, this would be like you'd be like, no way, this would happen. So, we grew up, and you grew up too with like the Big Ten looked a lot different than it does now. So is it hard to like grasp your head around Washington, Oregon? You was like everyone coming into the Big Ten. Are you excited for it? What's your overall takeaway on this whole new Big Ten?
Yeah, it's completely different, right? I think it's something that the Big Ten Conference was ahead of the mark. The Big Ten and the SEC of seeing how the landscape was going to change and then taking advantage of it by adding these great programs, to both of their respective conferences. And obviously with the addition of the West Coast teams, I'm excited to see what it looks like this fall. Because it's not going to be the same. There's no East and West. I think it's going to be really exciting, and I'm excited to see how it goes. Again, you're going to have to prepare for more variations of scheme, and obviously Oregon and Washington, how successful USC, UCLA, their offenses were this past season, which is a little different than the traditional Big Ten scheme. So I think it'll be interesting to see how that changes the conference and how people address things in the off season and overall and things like that. I think it's going to be awesome.
Yeah, definitely going to be entertaining. Tanner, got a few more questions to throw your way. You've been so generous and gracious with your time, man. We appreciate you coming on. I think there's going to be a lot of value for one. I think college football junkies are going to enjoy it, and then just like quarterback fans in general are really going to enjoy this episode. So, did you have a specific pregame routine, whether it was like music or warm up or something that you did before game, or is it different every time?
Yeah, no, I did the same stuff. I think, when you create good habits, it just makes things go easier. It makes yourself be more confident before a game. For me, I would do the same warm-up routine.
Okay.
I would listen to the same playlist, which is really about 5 or 6 Christian songs, to be honest with you.
Awesome.
Get on the field. I would do my hip activation, glute activation, go through my, I call it 1-2 ball drill stuff, really just activating my hips and my glutes and making sure that I'm driving the ball and not pushing the ball. And after that, I would be throwing to a manager at that point, and then I'd grab some tight ends and go through the same spot throws. And maybe, if we had a wrinkle, would do something else. But really, I just like to focus on outbreakers to each side, in cuts to each side, and then a deep ball each way. And then at the end, get a throw on the run each side. This was on my own. And I'd go back in, get my ankles taped, do the stuff, and put my headphones on, and then just go over the call sheet and, go over the openers and start to visualize even more what the game's going to look like, visualize myself out there ripping it and having success, and then I'd be ready to go.
Awesome. Who are some of the Christian artists? Do you remember? You listened
to? It was kind of a weird mashup. So Holby was on there. KB was on there.
I know KB,
and I think one of them was Elevation Worship.
Yep. No,
and then the last one was, I think, the specific version of the song I liked was kind of a spinoff. I think it was called like Indeed Worship or something like that.
Okay.
But those were the heavy hitters.
Heavy hitters, right? Awesome, man. Super cool. What did some of your arm care look like, or like your workouts look like? Were they similar to the team? Was it different, a bit more specialized to like your skill set, or just kind of take us through what
I think a lot of it, in the weight room was stuff that I built with the strength coaches, and a lot of band work, a lot of shoulder stabilization, rotation stuff. But for me, I think a lot of it was keeping my arm fresh with I love to do the Graston. I found that as the biggest thing that helped me. I didn't really like the Mark Pro. I don't know, it didn't help me a ton. So I would Graston and then do a dry needle that had stem in it for my scap, and I found that was the best thing that helped me was those two things. And so I'd mix it up every now and then, do a cup on my back or maybe even on my bicep. But for me, like it was more just the fatigue of scap and trap in training camp. And if my elbow ever got sore, I had to think, okay, I'm probably not throwing the ball with my proper mechanics right now. So let's try to change that. But we're going to fix this. We're going to always stay ahead of the game with our arm care stuff. But maybe I should look at my mechanics.
Yeah. Awesome, man. Really good mindset there. Good for young QBs to hear that. And speaking of young QBs, before we get you out of here, Tanner, again, you've been so great with your time. If you had 1 or 2 words of advice to give to a younger quarterback who maybe was in a similar situation that you were in high school, like a good recruit, maybe not a blue chipper Alabama 5-star, but also not someone who's like trying to make JV, like a good quarterback who is on his way. What would that piece of advice be?
Yeah, I would say I would frame it like this: break the box. So they're always going to try to find somebody better than you, whether that be in the portal or high school. That's their job. You have to understand that, and you have to beat that by being a better version of yourself every day and giving them no other chance but to play you. That's what I would say. Break the box of whatever your coaches may think you are, what outsiders think you are. Find a way to break out of that mold and become the best player you can be.
That's good, man. Really good stuff. And that's good for just life in general. So people listening, you can take that and apply it to That's a good word. And Tanner, we'll get you out of here. Whenever I end this, just stay on for a second or two, and we'll talk for a second.
Sounds good.
But is there anywhere like people can find you? Like I'm not great with social media, so I don't know if you have if you're pretty active that things kind of follow.
Yeah, not super active, but definitely on there. You can find me on Instagram at T_Morgan2, and then also for the training stuff at qbmotion _ Midwest.
Okay.
So and that's linked onto there, and see some videos of some cool scheme and some videos of some Qs ripping it. So
that's awesome.
If you're interested in that, put it in there.
Yeah, we'll link that. I'll make sure to get that handle and link that below or in the description. But man, Tanner, thanks so much for coming on, and everyone that's watching this or listening podcast, we thank you for tuning in. Again, just a big Quarterback Hub. We talk all things quarterback. So like, share, subscribe, all that YouTube podcast stuff, whatever else they say, and we'll see you next time. Peace.
Yeah, sounds great.